Good evening. Contrary to what has been said by Somadoda and David, I'm here to give you an optimistic account of the state of the nation. But before I do that, I think I need to deal with what I think is an injustice that has occurred and no South African has said anything about it. The Speaker of the National Assembly referred to the leader of the comrades on my left as a cockroach. And yesterday she apologized for referring to Julius Malema, to him as a cockroach. And Julius Malema in turn magnanimously apologized to Helen Zille for referring to her as a cockroach in 2010. I accept their apologies as incomplete as they are. I think these apologies are incomplete because neither of them has apologized to the cockroaches. But the failure to apologize to cockroaches, I believe, is an injustice to cockroaches in South Africa. But let me move to matters at hand. I am very happy that we were not asked to speak on the State of the Nation address, because it is my view that the State of the Nation and the State of the Nation address are two different things. In fact, it is my view that if you want to understand the State of the Nation address is not the place you go to. And therefore, I'm very happy that I have not been put in the awkward position of addressing the State of the Nation address. It is also my view that you cannot talk about the state of the nation without talking about the state of the discourse of that nation. And there are a few things I find disturbing about the state of our discourse as a nation. And let me illustrate the first thing I find disturbing with the story. In 2010, Eugene Terplanche was killed, and commentators and others declared that South Africa was sliding towards a state of racial civil war. 8 weeks later, more than 200,000 South Africans, black and white, gathered in Sandton, dressed in yellow, to wish Bafana Bafana well, which at the time, of course, was a futile exercise. But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that seeing this rainbow nation dressed in yellow, the same commentators and others declared that this was evidence that South Africa is the nirvana of racial harmony. In other words, in the space of 8 weeks, South Africans moved from a state of what I call hysterical optimism. Hysterical pessimism, with the killing of Terplanche, to a state of hysterical optimism. Today, given the events of the past few months and the events of the past week, we are once again seized by a state of hysterical pessimism about the state of the nation. It is my view that neither the state of hysterical pessimism nor that of hysterical optimism are helpful with regard to understanding the state of the nation, to understanding the challenges that face the nation, and therefore the solutions The second thing that concerns me about the state of our discourse is what I call echo chambers. What tends to happen, especially in matters political and in opinions about the ruling party and its government, is that people engage in these echo chambers. Something is said at the top of the chamber and is repeated unthinkingly throughout the chamber. And this in part is what shapes very important discussions about the state of the nation in South Africa. What that does in effect is to reduce us and our discourse to nothing better than motor car journalism. You know that kind of journalism. They give you a Mercedes-Benz to drive to some city to spend a few days. What kind of article are you going to write thereafter? And that's the state of our discourse. It's characterized by echo chambers in which we repeat unthinkingly what was said at the top. The third element of what worries me is the Orwellian manipulation that we see. And the Orwellian manipulation is perpetrated not only by politicians and political parties across the board. It is not perpetrated only by the SABC, the state broadcaster. I deliberately say state broadcaster. I think they've lost the right to be referred to as the public broadcaster. They are not my broadcaster. Maybe they are yours, but they are not mine. The state broadcaster. But the commercial media too, or they sometimes exaggerate and call themselves the independent media. The commercial media itself engages in the manipulation of news content. And therefore, to some extent, they themselves at times, and I'm not going to say every time because I was told long ago never to pick a fight with someone who has access to barrels of ink and tons of paper. So there are times when the commercial media engages in Orwellian manipulation itself. Unfortunately, the Orwellian manipulation and the engagement that takes place in the echo chambers affects, as I said, very important debates about the country. David spoke about the race debate. Now, we seldom, before I come to the race debate, we seldom go beyond speaking truth to power. We seldom do that because what we do is to speak truth only to the power of the ANC. As if that is enough. It's not. We need to speak truth to all forms of power.
You whisper truth.
We need, yes, we whisper truth. We need to speak the truth to the power of money, to the power of those who have political powers, to the power of the media, to the power of those who call themselves civil society. Because they, all of them, do not always exercise this power in ways that are in the interests of the ordinary South African citizen. And therefore, when we critique power, it is not enough to critique only the political power of the ANC and how it abuses it. We must critique all forms of power. Because when it comes to economic power, the Orwellian manipulation that we are subjected to forces us to ignore the fact that the South African economy is still a colonial economy that is still governed on the basis of a colonial logic. South Africa is not a country and its people a nation to be developed, but is a place where you extract value without developing the country and its people. We are subjected to economic analyses which deny this reality of the South African economy as one driven by a colonial mentality. Not a colonial mentality of a special type, because it is still those I call a cultural majority who are dominant in this economy. And it is not their dominance in the economy that is an important aspect of the state of the nation only. This cultural majority, which also happens to be a numerical minority, also has the advantage that its worldview, its ways of being, and its ways of seeing have become the dominant reality in South Africa. So when I talk about echo chambers, to a large extent, these chambers are created by those who occupy the position of a cultural majority, despite the fact that they are a numerical minority. The fact that people like me are part of that cultural majority who are black is incidental. We can have a debate as we continue. But if we look at what the events of the past few days tell us about the state of the nation, they tell the story of a country that has an iconic constitution. For instance, the decision to jam the signal was challenged because we have an iconic constitution. What might happen is that as we go forward, we might say with less conviction that this country also has an iconic democracy. Because the logic that was betrayed in the decision to jam the signal and in the decision to allow the security forces to violently eject MPs of the EFF is quite troubling. It suggests that it is a logic that might cause democratic reversals to occur or the beginnings of an anti-democratic climate to occur. It suggests a Soviet logic. It suggests the logic of the strong men of the post-independent African one-party state. It suggests a Mbogodo logic. But having said that, despite the fact that the state of the nation is also characterized by the underdevelopment of the youth and women, to the extent that the things we bemoan, unemployment, inequality, and poverty, are largely about the feminization of these indicators of underdevelopment. Despite all of that, despite the threats of an anti-democratic climate beginning to take root, despite the threat of reversals of democracy in South Africa, what we must bear in mind is that hysterical pessimism is not an option. What we must bear in mind is that democracy is hard, arduous, and dirty, and messy work. And most importantly, democracy does not develop like a straight line in a linear fashion. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.